Well, hello there, everyone. Welcome back to Suzerain and to the glorious nation of Swordland, where a weird bug has happened. Uh, I, for some reason, I was prompted with the starting options of customizing the character and setting the planet economy and all that shit. And with the first dialogue that I skipped through randomly. For a second there, I thought we lost the save. Hopefully, that's not gonna impact anything too badly. We'll see. Uh, Time for the Alliance of Nations meeting. I, David Wishy, and the rest of the Swordfish delegation of the Alliance of Nations arrived in Kirite. The local police escorted us to the Alliance headquarters in downtown Constantium, immediately recognizable by its gleaming dome. On entering the building, we were met by a parliamentary guide who briefed us about the procedures. After a strict security screening, the staff ushered us to the first floor. We entered the massive circular assembly hall and took our designated seats. David sat next to me. All of the world's most powerful people under one gleaming dome. It's amazing how someone has managed to fill a room with people that absolutely loathe each other. It's truly astounding. Humanity has come far. How are you feeling, Anton? Ever since that happened to Peter, I'm amazed you've been holding up so well. I remember how inseparable the two of you were in university. He's been more of a friend to me than I could have ever been to him. I wish I had done more to help him. It is tough to be president, making harsh decisions and dealing with their consequences. I wish I could have supported you more, but time has been a cruel mistress. For what it's worth, I appreciate all the advice you've given me. Thank you, Anton. From a distance, we could see the President of the General Assembly, Mr. Nines, approaching his designated position. Well, the session is about to start. Let's get comfortable. It's going to be a long day. Mr. Nines opened the session with a short speech called the first speaker to the floor. It's my great pleasure to invite the Prime Minister of Lesbia to address this assembly. Patricio Alvarez stood and walked up to the podium as the assembly applauded. Mr. President, it is my pleasure to return to this podium. David leaned in and spoke in a low voice. Let's see how crazy this year's session will get. I'm surprised he isn't drunk. David chuckled. When I last spoke here, the message I gave was of encouragement and support to this organization and the vital role it plays. Of all the challenges Eastern Mercopa and the whole world has faced since then, one has grown larger and more imminent than any other. The threat of the so-called socialist states and the actions taken by their authoritarian rulers with no regard to international law. A loud noise came from the table of Valsland. I saw Emmerich Hegel pounding his fist on his table in protest. Looks like the Chancellor is already mad. David nodded. Today, the need to come together as the leaders of the free world is more important than ever. The CSP, under the leadership of the United Contana, has been fueling Valksland's military-industrial complex and its expansionist aims in Eastern Mercopa. The world cannot turn a blind eye to the increasing naval presence of Valksland in the Markian Sea. We hereby call for the immediate withdrawal of all naval vessels with any offensive capabilities from the international waters. A lot of noise came from the assembly hall. In response, most of the Western Mercopan delegates were clapping, while others either shouted in protest or sat in stony silence. Let us also not forget about the recent events that transpired in another state with socialist teachings, a state that wages war on its own innocent citizens, Velen. That's a bunch of horseshit. Velen's not even socialist. Strictly speaking, Smolak's party is called the Vezek Nationalist Party of Newrist Socialism. Ah yes, because having socialist on the party name totally means that the party is socialist. This guy gets his political education from Turning Point USA, apparently. Their purge of the minorities in their country was again largely ignored by the international community. I would go as far as to call it a genocide. Velen violated our past treaties and mobilized their armed forces, deploying them close to our borders and authorizing them to partake in massacres. Lesbia was affected not only by the large wave of refugees coming from Velen, but the subsequent government seizure of all our companies that were active in the country. We hereby call the member states to take to action against Velen and its rogue government. Thank you. Okay, let's not react. We walked back to his seat amidst enthusiastic applause from most of the Mercapan delegates. President Nines waited for the noise to calm down and invited the next speaker, the President of Velen, Viktor Smolak. Smolak stood up as he walked past Patricio Alvarez. He brushed him aside with an exaggerated sweep of his arms. When he reached the podium, he fumbled with the microphone for a few seconds. Then he smiled at Alvarez mockingly as he raised the height of it. Look at all the theatrics. Yes, that's him. Victor turned to President Nines and bowed slightly. Mr. President. He then turned back to us and stared into the hall for a few seconds. Fellow delegates, it is true that the world today faces a multitude of challenges. In the midst of these challenges, the world's most powerful leaders gathered here in Kirute. And what do? They make threats, promote hate, and spread lies. Is this the alliance of nations we all want? Where is the cooperation and friendship? Where is the unity? I want to remind you of the wars that the West fought on our soil, of the foreign troops who occupied our country and seized our valuable resources. I want to remind you how they stole the oil from our sacred soil, and they did not know when to stop. The ATO soldiers left, but their interference never ceased. They financed armed rebel groups whose only purpose is to create terror inside our country. So, fellow delegates, don't you dare speak about Velen before you acknowledge your involvement in our civil war, before you acknowledge your own dark past. It's an empty argument, doesn't justify what Velen did. What did you expect, Mr. President? It's President Smolak. Exactly. As is well known, after the tremendous tragedy of the Velen Civil War, Arcasia made a deal with United Contana, where they agreed upon the withdrawal of their troops along with the removal of half of an army. Not only did they weaken us, we were left alone in facing the genocidal Bloodish Freedom Front. Fuck you. With the ATO funds together with Rumberg. Oh, of course. I will show you some of the evidence of foreign interference. He picked up a large stack of papers and waved them back and forth. I have clear evidence of direct aid from Rumberg to the Bloodish Freedom Front. They smuggled tons of K-74s in Velen, they smuggled in their spies, smuggled in mercenary commanders. Let's not say anything. These documents will be published everywhere. Copies have already been sent to the Investigated Affairs of the Alliance of Nations. I expect this organization to do its task and investigate this properly, instead of leaving Velen behind as they have always done. Coming back to the claim of the lesbian representative, first, there is no evidence of civilian massacres by the Vezek forces, nor so-called purges of minorities. Second, the operation was limited only to the militant BFF, not the Bloods in general. Third, we know your government is also implicated in the funding of the BFF, and that your oil companies aided their militants during the operation. Fourth, as the state, we only took what was ours. The companies the delegates spoke of were not only aiding militants, they were brought to Velen by force. Now that Velen will no longer recognize the right of any other country to determine what type of weapons we are permitted to possess or what type of policies we follow within our borders, Velen stands stronger and more united than ever. Our people have spoken, the enemies inside our borders are crushed. Now I ask every delegate here to read our report on the connection of the West with the armed militants in Eastern Merkaba, and I ask the Alliance of Nations to do what's right. Velen only wants peace, our people want peace, they are counting on the support and understanding of all the nations of the world. Their proclamation is free Velen or death. The assembly roared with particularly loud applause coming from the seats of the Rican nations. Seems to be popular with Rika, doesn't he? Well, he played the victim here pretty strongly, and his anti-imperialist stance has definitely earned him sympathy from Ricans. Most of that continent has still not achieved stability after gaining their independence from their colonial suzerains. It's easy to forget it has only been a few years since the revolutions. Victor slowly walked back to his seat as he applauded himself. Of course he did. He saluted the Rican delegates as he passed them. Next, President Dines invited Martin van Horten to the podium. He walked up to the microphone with quick steps. He was frowning and clenching his fists. I could almost see his jaw trembling. He looks pissed. You blame him? His navy is being harassed by Valksland every day now. Mr. President, fellow delegates of the Assembly and friends, it is an honor to be with you today. I wish we could meet under different circumstances. Once again, the CSP nations, and in particular Valksland, have shown us that they are willing to do to achieve their political aims. I must first thank the delegates from Swordland for being brave enough to support Agnolia when the whole world left us alone. We were one of the first countries to propose proper cooperation among Eastern Merkopan nations, yet when we were threatened by Valkslandian expansionism, no one came to our side. Although Mr. Alvarez voiced his indirect support for us earlier in today's session, I can't keep myself from wondering where he was when our fleets were under attack by the very socialists he spoke about. So here I am, asking for the support of the fellow member states of the Alliance of Nations. Agnolia is under attack by Valksland. A loud banging noise emerged from the table of Valkslandian delegates. All of them were pounding their fists on their table. Let's just keep watching. Mr. President, please moderate the assembly. This is more than disrespectful. Emmerich Hegel began shouting curses as Nines repeatedly banged his gavel for order. After a minute of back and forth shouting, the noise settled and Nines allowed Martin to continue. As you all know, our drilling ships, oil tankers, and even fishing vessels have been disappearing in the Markian Sea, captured or sunk by Valksland. And the Valkslandian fleet is patrolling the seas around Heliland with complete disregard to international laws. I call to the Alliance of Nations to find a resolution to this never-ending conflict that Valksland created. We demand the immediate withdrawal of all naval forces from our territorial waters. Malianist terror surrounds us on all sides. I call the democratic world to action against the tyranny of Malnievism, authoritarianism, militarism, and extremism. The banging noise started again. Hegel stood up and approached the rostrum. "You're a spineless jerk, a lackey of Arcasian imperialism." President Nines called for silence and started hitting the gavel. What does he think he's doing? All of your complaints against us are a direct result of your capitalist and neo-colonialist systems. President Nines, please, what is this? President Nines smacked his gavel in vain as a shouting match broke out in the assembly. Finally, after a few minutes, the other Valkslandian delegates convinced Hegel to sit back down. I believe I don't need to speak more about this subject, everything is clear as day. Mr. Hegel's actions speak volumes about the reality of Valksland and their corrupted ideology. I hope to see this conflict resolved with the help of the Alliance of Nations soon. He quickly left the podium and nodded to the other Agnolian delegate. The two left the assembly hall. President Nines announced the next speaker, Emmerich Hegel. Hegel immediately took his place and spoke in a low, soothing tone. Thank you. Stay silent. Here we go. First of all, I want to extend a due welcome to the new states from Riga that have joined this organization. After fighting for years against colonialism and imperialism, they more than earned our membership vote. I am overjoyed to see them finally represented in this assembly. As our numbers grow and more states are represented in this stage, we come ever closer to finding resolutions to the conflicts that plague us. For hundreds of years, the dominant economies of Merkopa raised, pillaged, and exploited the continents of Riga and Xena. Sadly, Valksland was also part of this splendor in the years before the revolution, when it still clung to the idea of imperialism. But when our masses found their voice, the old colonial powers and their new financiers turned against them. These powers did whatever they could to hamper our revolutions. They did not want the people to be heard. They are scared of us for showing the possibility of a better path. Of course, they don't want us to succeed. We threaten the productivity that runs on the blood and sweat of their working class. And now they have started labeling us the aggressors. Yet we all know it was the Arcasians who built up the military bases all around Arcopa. It was the ATO that was first formed to fight against Malianovism. I mean, he's not wrong. Valksland holds the right to protect its territorial waters and trade from threats. They are the aggressors in this case, but the whole speech is mostly true. The delegates from Lesbia and Agnolia brought up the Falenko Treaty. But what are they doing when the ATO forces patrol the Antashian Sea? They were silent. And what about Heliland? How about the Valks being killed by the Agnolian government because they protested against an appointed governor? Agnolia and their allies in Sordland have no right to claim they are upholding liberty and democracy. Other nations have no right to intervene in the matters between Agnolia and Valksland. Hey, don't bring us into this mess, okay? Just as no country in the world has the right to determine what type of naval vessels we use, no country can force us to not defend our seas. If there is a conflict, the Alliance can resolve. Let's start with the Arcasian base on Ravnos Island. Lesbia has been housing Arcasian troops and missiles by our borders for years, and none of the member states even talk about it. I also want the member states to look at the Arcasian bases in both Lesbia and Sordland. We needed the money, okay? And the protection against Stromberg. Not proud of it. And if the Alliance of Nations truly claims to have the people's best interest at heart, they cannot stay silent about what the Agnolian government did in Heliland, how they took away the rights of our people. Perhaps then there can be proper dialogue between our nations, and the Alliance of Nations can finally demonstrate that it can serve its intended purpose. But unfortunately, the Alliance of Nations remains all too willingly to overlook such human rights violations. However, the Valkslandian government is ready as always to fight the forces of oppression and colonial servitude on behalf of free people everywhere. He raised his left fist. e revolutem vescore. Is that Swordish? Did I catch that right? He said the revolution will come, yes, but it's in old Volgish. Very similar to Swordish, right? Some words are even written the same way, but I'm surprised you caught that from his accent. Most of the delegates from Xena, Riga, and Contana responded with thunderous applause. Hegel shook hands with them as he walked back to his seat. President Nines announced the next speaker, Queen Beatrice Livingston. Ah, this fucking cunt. Dear President of the Assembly, dear delegates, dear leaders of the world. Just as my fellow Eastern Mercopan delegates spoke about the troubles plaguing our country, I also have to bring attention to the plight of the people of the North. The Alliance of Nations, the ATO, the CSP, and even the OMEC have never supported our people when they've been through tragic atrocities. Unlike many of the Western countries here, we never received financial aid when their natural disasters struck our lands. Maybe you should stop invading other people. The pain of our people was never recognized, not even when they faced the threat of genocide by the hands of the Swordish kings. In light of all that, I implore this alliance to take a closer look at the actions of our southern neighbors. They took in traitors and gave them protection. Their president even went so far as to blame our country for spying on his administration through his own private secretary. Yes, that I did, because you did. And he expects the world to believe his lies. Mr. President, point of order! President Nines overruled my objection and told me to wait for the Queen to finish speaking. I hereby invoke all of you to determine the initiation of a proper intergovernmental investigation into Swordland. On what fucking grounds? If the Alliance continues to shirk its given duties, you can trust in Romberg to take the matters into her own hands. It is also important to point out that Romberg will not stand idly by if more Arcaisian military are transferred to the Eastern Mercopa. Hereby condemn both the ATO and Swordland for allowing Arcasia to settle in our region. Before I finish, I also want to say, Mr. Smolak, I am looking forward to reading your report. I wonder what this so-called evidence is all about. Know that your slander does not work on us. Know that we are ready to die for our freedom. Know that our kingdom stands firm and strong. Expect a grand awakening. Fuck's sake. That doesn't sound good. Thank you. Grand awakening? That sounded like a threat. It did. She left the rostrum without getting much applause. Then President Martin spoke my name. Mr. Anton Rain, President of Swordland, I invite you to address the Assembly. David immediately started applauding. Good luck, Mr. President. I walked up to the rostrum and took my place in the podium. In front of me were some of the most powerful leaders in the entire world. I looked them in the eyes. Thank you, Mr. President, fellow delegates. Sure, let's kiss the Assembly's ass. Anybody who assembles this rostrum must appreciate what a significant gathering he is addressing. We must remain devoted to the dream of a peaceful and free world, a united world. Our century is the century of the struggles for freedom, the century of liberation from foreign occupation. Difficult choice. Let's criticize the United Nations for not doing enough. It is time to ask the hard questions. Ask if this organization is achieving any of its aims. Sure, let's respond to some of the topics. Now I'd like to address some of the topics mentioned here today. I condemn the... Yeah, no, I will straight up... I condemn Smolak's crimes against the Bloodish people. Suzerain stands together with the Bloodish people. I'd also like to extend my support to Mr. Van Horten. Sutherland stands together with Agnolia and will keep its stance against Fogslandian aggression. Sutherland will do whatever it takes to achieve peace in Eastern Markova. Emmerich Hegel pounded his fists on the table again. Peace? You can achieve nothing, you are a puppet of Arcasia. President Nine slammed his gavel down. I couldn't stop myself from responding. Don't you interrupt me again, you're mistaking me for my predecessors. President Nine slammed his gavel down again and warned me not to respond back. Next, I would also like to address the Queen of Rumburg. Sorland always wanted to have peace between our nations, yet we are being threatened by Rumburg. We wanted to be diplomatic, even when Rumburg shot down our plane. I mean, yeah, the K-74s is true. I also have some evidence to show to the Assembly Mr. Smolak was right about the K-74s. We discovered that many militant groups in Sorland were being financed or armed by Rumburg. There's another important piece of evidence that we have provided to us by someone close to the Rumburgian government. Mr. Hailstone was branded as a traitor in Rumburg for blowing the whistle on the country's hidden nuclear facilities. I hereby call on the Alliance of Nations to serve its duty. Rumburg and its nuclear facilities must be properly investigated. I'd like to bring my speech to a close. Not taken. We stand and always will stand for the rights of the people of Sorland and Eastern Markova, just as those in other countries. As in other continents. There cannot be any more procrastination or delay. The AN must adopt decisions according to the wishes of the people of the world. Peace in Markova, peace in the world. There was some applause from the assembly. Only some. Thank you. I left the podium. I walked back to my seat. David did not stop applauding until I sat down. How was it? It was not a bad speech, Mr. President. You did well. President Nines announced the next speaker, Dwight Walker. Mr. President, I first want to congratulate you on your election to this high office. Mr. Secretary, delegates to the Alliance of Nations, ladies and gentlemen, fellow friends. We meet again on our quest to bring peace and light into this world, but even though some of the clouds have lifted, the world has not yet escaped the darkness. The Continent Security Pact is rapidly expanding its influence. It is very troubling to see the democratic nations of Merkapa be threatened by those Malianivist powers. I refer, of course, to the presence of Alexlandian and Continent fleets in the Markian Sea. They are harassing other nations and hampering international trade. This is not an attack against world peace, an attack against the free trading nations of the world. Today, our obligations to world peace are being tested by United Contana and the Malianivist bloc. If we fail to counter this threat, if we stay idle and allow them to surround us with their war machines and blockades, if the attackers do not face any consequences, then this unstable peace we believe we have built will be the world's downfall, and posterity will point its fingers at us for not stopping it. Enrique Egel and the other Valkslandian delegates started making noise again. This time Hegel had taken off his shoe and was banging in the table with it. Ah yes, the shoe incident. It is in fact one of the emotes in my Twitch channel, if you want to subscribe. Twitch.tv/leftistpo. I have no words. The Chancellor has gone mad. This is getting ridiculous. He's not even ashamed at his age. Despite its claims, the CSP's actions will only bring about war. Yet, we still believe United Contana and Arcasia, together with their allies, can come to an understanding for our mutual benefit and our desire to avoid the destruction of the world. We believe that all the people of the world must be free to choose their own future. No country, be it Arcasia or United Contana, has the right to impose its values on others. But I will say this to the leaders of United Contana: if either of us is to be secure, we need a peaceful cooperation, not defense systems, forced blockades, or shows of naval superiority. If the Alliance of Nations cannot find a resolution to the conflict, the ATO remains ready and able to react. Hegel stood up with the shoe in his hand. What is that supposed to mean? You're promoting war in the Alliance of Nations? Mr. President, this cannot... Nine slammed the gavel down and shouted, "Silence, please." Mr. Chancellor, please let me finish. We do not interrupt you when you address the Assembly. Finally, I propose that the Alliance of Nations undertake the noble cause of helping the people of the world through rewriting and properly enforcing its Human Rights Declaration. The Alliance of Nations cannot survive as a static organization. Its size and duties are increasing enormously. It should adapt to the changing world. But peace and rights do not rest in the hands of this organization alone. They rely on the hearts of our people and the spirit of cooperation between our nations. So let it be known, my fellow inhabitants of this world, let us take our stand and see if we can finally achieve a lasting peace. Thank you. Most of the assembly applauded his speech, the ATO delegates in particular. That speech had very dangerous connotations to it. Yes, I hope we won't be seeing a direct war between the superpowers anytime soon. That would be the destruction of the planet. The applause continued for some time. Walker shook hands with various delegates on his way back to his seat. President Nines announced the last speaker before the break. It was Leon Malenev. Malenev slowly walked to the rostrum with his iconic suit. All of the CSP delegates stood up and applauded him. Honorable Chairman and fellow delegates to the Alliance of Nations. Here we are again at the most esteemed meeting of state representatives in the world. However, increasingly we are being threatened, disregarded, attacked, or ignored in this assembly. The representative of Arcasia has just shown his unfriendly attitude towards us yet again. Arcasia would have you believe we are standing in the way of lasting peace. Yet the peace they talk about was only possible thanks to our missiles and our growing base in the developing world. The ATO kept waging wars against people's revolutions and forcing new independent states to be their puppets, binding them to themselves through the Arcasian lira. And now, yet another Arcasian president is telling us that we are the aggressors and they are the keepers of peace. We will not be silent anymore against these lies. And they are the keepers of peace. Uh, when was this peace you talk about? Where was this cooperation between our countries? Have you ever accepted our invitation to talk about denuclearization? If you don't like us, don't accept our deals, don't listen to our concerns, and keep pointing fingers at us. Why did you invite us to the Alliance of Nations? Every year, United Contana comes to this assembly to address the real problems of real people, people who suffer because of your systems, your wars, and your ignorance. Whether you like it or not, we'll keep representing the laborers, the slaves, the oppressed of this world, and believe it or disregard it, history is on our side. We say to the representatives of capitalist countries, come and visit us. Come and see the revolution working in Contana. Show our continent to your people without distorting the reality. If you cannot do that, then you need not come. We believe socialism will triumph over capitalism in the end. Such is the logical conclusion of the development of humankind. This time, lesbian delegates starting laughing very loudly. Some of the other delegates booed. Let's keep watching. You can keep laughing, gentlemen. Communism will bury you. Suddenly, the laughter turned into shouting. If you really believe in cooperation, we'll be waiting. We're not going anywhere. However, if the ATO keeps intervening in our matters, it is natural that the CSP would react. Despite threats from the ATO, Rumberg, or any other nation or organization, we must not succumb to further divisions and violence. We must ask ourselves, what do the people of our countries expect of us? They surely don't want war and bloodshed. So let us leave to our children and grandchildren good memories of our time and a better future for all. Let them look at history and say, once there were great divisions and complex problems, but the leaders of the world came together in the Alliance of Nations and succeeded in settling them in order to ensure our peaceful lives. Let us act in such a way to make this session not a session of threats, but a session of hopes and the realization of them. The government of United Contana and the United Peoples of Contana are ready to serve their duties for world peace. Long live the People's Revolution. Sure, let's stand up and applause. It was a nice speech. The applause continued for some time. Suddenly broke into massive applause. The applause continued for some time. Millennium slowly walked back to his seat as president announced the break. That was a lot. It was troubling. Tensions are too high. It's quite scary, to be honest. We need to be careful. He walked out the hall to have some lunch and fresh air. But okay, let us see. ATO grants Agar observer status. CSP warns race against formation of anti-Malinivist union. Our election poll shows that 16% of Sardish citizens will vote for the USP in the upcoming election. not. I mean, not great if we stick with the USP. And now we have a phone call with the Queen Bitch. That is gonna have to be left for next episode. Thank you all very much for watching. As always, I have been Pope. Please do remember to like, comment, and subscribe. I will see you all next time.